Hello, and welcome back to Everyday Writers, your one-stop shop for demystifying the writing process. We're here to be your helpful guides on your journey to becoming a published author. I'm one of your hosts, Crystal McQueen.
And I'm your other host, Jordan S. Keller. Thank you all so much for joining us on this episode. Today, we're going to be discussing the common writing rules and when to ignore them. And I'd like to kick things right off with Crystal discussing filter words. This has been the best piece of advice you've ever brought to our writing group.
Well, and I had just learned it. Like right before I met you and came to our writing group, I had actually had somebody give me this feedback in another writing workshop. So, filter words are basically words that you put onto different sentences to filter the world through your main character. Those are things like she saw, he heard, they felt, she knew. And so when you're actually going through these words, you're actually distancing your reader. So, an example of this is he thought he liked the taste of apple pie, but it wasn't as good as he remembered. Now, that's a good sentence. It makes sense. But if you put your reader into your character, you could say apple pie used to taste good, but not anymore. So now you're closer. As a reader, you're like, apple pie used to taste good, but not anymore. You want to know more versus he thought he liked the taste of apple pie, but it wasn't as good as he remembered. And so you're kind of like looking, you're on the outside looking in. Another example that is a little bit close to my heart is she heard a noise downstairs. She knew something must be down there. Now, as somebody who's had a bat in my house, this sentence is fine for me because I have I have visceral memories that are associated with this. However, if you're a reader and you want to pull somebody deeper in, maybe you get rid of the she heard and she knew and change it to a floorboard creaked in the darkness. Something was there. So now we're like way deeper into the story. We're drawn into like what's down there versus, seeing somebody sitting up in a bed with all of their cats at the end of the bed with their ears perked up going, well, hope she lives, but don't really care. And so that's what filtered words do is they kind of like they distance you out of the story. And it really slows down your prose. And so
Mhm.
another area that really will slow down your prose is passive voice. So Jordan, what is passive voice and how do we avoid it?
Yeah, so passive voice is whenever your subject receives an action versus them doing the action. An example is the book was read by Ashley or Robin started chasing the Riddler. Instead of passive voice, you want to use an active voice, which is clearer, less confusing, and it keeps your prose flowing and focused on your character. As a science fiction writer, I want to keep an active voice so things are exciting, my reader can stay connected to their character, and things just progress a lot quicker. So if we take our passive voice examples, so we turn them into active, they become, instead of the book was read by Ashley, we make our subject first. So Ashley read the book. And then by removing any startup phrases such as began to, started to, we change it into an active voice. So Robin started chasing the Riddler, now becomes Robin chased the Riddler. It just puts you right in that moment. And a fun way to detect passive voice in your own writing is by ending your sentences with by zombies. And so if that sentence still makes sense with by zombies, it's usually passive and you should make it active. Another way to strengthen your prose is by the age-old tip of show, don't tell. Crystal, will you be able to break that down?
Yeah, so we're actually going to take the filter words that we have, and we're actually going to take those examples and go from a filtered sentence to a sentence without filter, but not really explaining why the character feels a certain way and turning it into a show moment. So, for example, we started with he thought he liked the taste of pie, but it wasn't as good as he remembered. And then we changed it to apple pie used to taste good, but not anymore. But if we make it into a show moment, apple pie doesn't taste good anymore. Not like when he was a child. Then it tasted of home and love and his grandmother's hugs. So we took that moment of just, I don't like apple pie anymore to, it's not really about the taste of the apple pie. It's really that it doesn't give him that emotion of comfort, of home anymore. And so that actually deepens our character rather than just telling them, well, he doesn't like apple pie anymore. And so if we go a little bit deeper into that other one where she heard a noise downstairs, she knew something must be down there. We changed it a little bit deeper to a floorboard creaked in the darkness. Something was there. But if we actually make it a bit more visceral, we show the area around us. The dog's ears perked, and we both stared into the darkness. Something was down there. So now we're all creeped, like it's not just the character facing that darkness alone. Like we're all like we don't know what's going to happen next. We're all sitting on that precipice waiting to tip over. And so that's really what show does is it takes a moment and makes it an actual visual visceral moment. It doesn't just tell you what, it also gives you a sense of why. So
I love that.
that's what we mean when we're talking about show don't tell, which everybody says show don't tell, show don't tell. And I feel like people say it so often and they don't actually when people used to tell me show don't tell at the beginning, like what do you mean by that? What am I telling versus what am I showing? Because sometimes it's okay to tell, but as
Mhm.
much as possible, you want to have every sentence hold meaning and weight, not only for your character, but for your story. And I know that's like a big ask, but it's also just something to keep in mind. Does my sentence add to my story? And
Mhm.
that's what you really want to ask. So we've been talking a lot about strengthening that prose, but let's take a quick step back and talk about one of the most common mistakes new writers make, and that's formatting dialogue. You can have the best prose, but if it's riddled with errors, it might be holding you back. So Jordan, as somebody who's got a lot of experience critiquing work, talk to me about the actual structure and format for dialogue tags.
Yeah, so dialogue tags, dialogue formatting are one of my biggest pet peeves, and I say it all with love. But if your agent, your editor, your beta reader, if they're too focused on correcting these small grammar concerns, they're not going to be able to pay attention to the big pictures that you want them to be looking on.
Yep.
So please know your grammar, please know your dialogue. And these are some of those major rules that are steadfast, they should not be broken. Rule number one is all of your punctuation will go inside of your quotation marks. So your periods, your commas, your exclamation points, and your question marks will always go in your quotations. If you end your spoken sentence with an exclamation point or a question mark, the subject inside of the tag will be lowercase unless it's a proper noun. So, do you like dogs? She asked. The she is lowercase versus do you like dogs? Jeremy asked. Jeremy is uppercase since it's a proper noun. The next rule is you'll end your spoken dialogue with a comma when it includes a dialogue tag. So she said, she whispered, she shouted. If you're indicating your speaker through an action with a complete sentence, so that will include a subject, a verb, and a predicate, you'll use a period or whatever punctuation is necessary. So an example of this would be, where have you been? She set the keys on the counter. Or your resume is blank. He tapped the pages in front of him. So if they're two complete sentences, make sure you're using a period within those quotations.
Those are
And
great examples,
oh,
by the
thank
way. I,
you,
I
thank
love
you.
the I love how you get away from dialogue tags by showing what this who's talking by what they're doing.
Yeah, and so as you're reading your books, reading any book, you'll notice that most dialogue isn't she said, he said, she said, he said. You're painting the whole scene throughout the conversation with movements, and I love it. It's my favorite thing in the world. So you don't said isn't dead, but if you can use a dialogue or a action tag, I strongly recommend it. But our last rule for dialogue formatting is always, always, always have a new line for a new speaker. This is for clarity purposes. If all your dialogue is in one big paragraph, you're going to confuse your readers on who is talking. This will also include any nonverbal cues. So she nodded, he hesitated. Those will all be different lines. So whenever you're querying and you're sending out your manuscript to agents, you want to make sure you're presenting the very best version of your book. And this is why I stress the dialogue. An agent will not give you a second chance if they don't think you can handle the basics. So Crystal, you were a slush pile reader for an agency for a little while. Are there other things that an agent will turn down a manuscript for?
Yeah, so unfortunately for any slush pile reader out there, like those are the ones that are unsolicited manuscripts that come out and they have people like me read them. And I have to actually pitch them to the agent to say, this is why I liked this enough for you to actually read it. So if I'm stuck with things like dialogue tags where that's not right, or there's a bunch of other errors, grammar errors, uh, it's going to be a harder for me to actually create a pitch for the agent to read something, even if I really like the story. And so another example of that is I was judging a contest, and one of the pieces that I got was about 50-50 as to whether or not AI wrote it or this person wrote it and then took a thesaurus to every single verb. It wasn't just the verbs, it was the nouns too, but just like tried to make every word as complex as possible. Now, I will say that verbs can really enhance your story. So if you have words like ate versus devoured, like I ate a piece of pie versus I devoured a piece of pie. Eating a piece of pie feels like more mundane. I just ate it, but devouring it means I'm hungry, or I have some kind of emotion that is causing me to binge eat or something like that. So like begged versus coerced, like I begged my mom to take me to the mall versus I coerced my sister into giving me $20. There's a difference into the type of verb, and it can actually enhance your sentence. Another way that you can actually use stronger verbs is to improve things like adverbs, right? Like
Hmm.
he left the room angrily. You could say he stormed out, right? So adding an adverb to a weaker verb to give it inflection or meaning doesn't really enhance your prose. It actually kind of makes it a little bit clunky. So if you can actually create a stronger verb to go with a sentence that tells me not only what the person is doing, but their emotion, it makes me feel like somebody just stormed out of the room and slammed the door behind them.
Yeah.
Another thing is like a lot of times we can actually put in a type of emphasis on the character's intention. So if you say something like he does his chores every day, even though he doesn't want to do them, that was a lot of words to say something that you could more easily and clearly say he slogs through his chores every day. Like I know he hates it. I know he doesn't want to do it, but he still does them every day. So I'm able to infer a whole lot more through the stronger verb than having to add additional words to that sentence. However, you can go too far.
Of course you can.
You can go too far with this. And so you need the verb to actually add meaning to your sentence in order to use it. So, for example, if you have somebody say, I absconded with her wallet, like why did you use that verb? Like what does that add? Why wouldn't you just say I stole her wallet or I swiped her wallet? Or, like there's a lot of different ways that you could say that. So that particular bigger word doesn't really add to the sentence. It doesn't really tell me anything about her. And it makes the piece harder to read.
I
So
didn't
I
even know what
do
that word meant until today.
So I do think that it's really important for, you to use words that have meaning, but it's not just to show off your vocabulary. It really is to deepen your character. And so we're talking about other things that kind of like draw you out of the piece. And another area that would turn me off of a piece is when somebody overly relies on cliches. So Jordan, talk to me about
Yeah.
cliches and metaphors and how you use them.
Yeah, so you want to stay away from the overly used cliches like raining cats and dogs, black as night, high as a kite, things that you hear all the time because you've heard them all the time. There's no originality in them. They're boring for us to hear, they're boring for us to write. So just avoid all your normal cliches. And the most important thing is all these basic cliches aren't going to help strengthen your world. So when you're using metaphors and similes in your own writing, you want them to match your character and your world. So if your main character is a chef, he's going to see the world a lot differently than if your main character is a weather reporter. Your chef character might compare stressful situations to the heat of the kitchen, while your weather reporter might compare their first kiss to a thunderstorm. So those similes and metaphors are much more impactful because they're going to shed light on your character and your world. This is also going to be for different demeanors of characters. So if you have a very happy character, they're going to see world situations much differently than a very sad character or a very angry character. And now I'm really sad because I think we're running out of time for our episode this month.
It's true. I think we are out of time. So thank you so much for letting us be part of your writing journey. And just remember to avoid those filler words.
Keep your sentences active.
And apologies for the cliche, but show, don't tell.
And please study the rules of dialogue. Please, please, please format your dialogue correctly. But please also join us next time for setting, place, and world building, where we're going to talk about the importance, pitfalls, and when oversharing is too much and when you might be oversharing. If you have questions that we missed in today's episode, please let us know on our Facebook page, Everyday Writers, or in the comment section down below. We'll see you next time,
And don't forget, every day is a good day to write.
and I'll see you at next group.